Okay, let's talk about the book of Jeremiah. For a lot of people, it's one of the longest and honestly most confusing books in the entire Bible, right? It feels chaotic, it's repetitive, and it seems almost impossible to follow in a straight line. But what if all that confusion is actually a clue? What if it's pointing us to how the book was built? Well, in this explainer, we're going to put on our detective hats and solve the puzzle of how this ancient masterpiece was put together. And hey, if you've ever tried to read Jeremiah and just felt completely lost, you are in very good company. The famous scholar R.P. Carroll once said, "The person who is not confused by the book of Jeremiah does not understand it." So get this, that feeling of confusion, it actually means you're on the right track. You're starting to see the puzzle for what it is. To get our heads around it, think of the book like a really old farmhouse. It started with a small core structure. But then, over decades, new wings were added, a porch was built on, a second story here, until the original floor plan is almost impossible to see. Or here's another way to think about it. Imagine trying to collect every sermon a famous preacher gave over a 50-year career, and then just binding them all together without any dates or chronological order. That's the kind of literary puzzle we're dealing with. And that's exactly why the book feels so nonlinear and why it seems to repeat itself. It's constantly jumping between different styles, poetry to stories to sermons. See, this wasn't a book written in one sitting. It's the product of a ministry that spanned nearly half a century of absolute chaos. We're talking war, political upheaval, and exile. So how in the world do we make sense of it all? Well, we start by looking at the building materials. Scholars started to realize that this literary farmhouse wasn't built with just one type of wood. It was actually constructed using three very different kinds of material. The huge breakthrough came when a scholar named Sigmund Moenkel had this brilliant idea to classify all the material into three simple categories, A, B, and C. And as soon as you do that, bam, a hidden structure starts to appear. We're not looking at a mess, we're looking at a fascinating mix of poetry, narrative stories, and prose sermons. So what are these things exactly? Well, the A material is that powerful, punchy poetry. These are short, fiery, prophetic declarations. The B material is basically biography. These are narrative stories about Jeremiah's incredibly intense life. And finally, the C material is made up of these long, flowing, almost transcript-like sermons. The entire book, the whole thing, is woven together from these three distinct threads. But here's the really amazing part. We don't have to just guess how these pieces were all put together. The book of Jeremiah actually contains its own author's notes, leaving us these incredible clues about its own construction. It's like finding the architect's blueprint tucked away in a wall of that old farmhouse. So this brings us to the crucial question, right? How was this collection of poetry and stories and sermons actually assembled into one book? It turns out the answer has been hiding in plain sight this whole time, right inside the text itself. Now, this was not a quick project. This timeline shows a process that spanned 50 years. It all starts with Jeremiah's calling, but get this. The first command to actually write anything down doesn't come for over 20 years. And that first scroll, it gets dramatically destroyed by a furious king who cuts it up and throws it in a fire. This leads to a second, expanded version being created. And this process of writing, adding, and compiling just kept going for decades. And like I said, the book actually names these different documents for us. Chapter 36 gives us the whole story of the first and second scrolls. Other sections mention a specific letter sent to the exiles in Babylon, a separate book of consolation, and even oracles against Babylon written on yet another scroll. These were all independent writings at first that were eventually woven together into the book we have today. But just when you think the puzzle is solved, there's one final massive twist. Archaeologists discovered that there wasn't just one ancient version of the book of Jeremiah. There were two. Okay, so on one hand, we have what's called the Septuagint. It's the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and it's about 14% shorter than the book we usually read, and it arranges some huge sections in a totally different order. On the other hand, we have the Masoretic text. This is the traditional Hebrew version that our modern English Bibles are based on. It's longer, and as we said, it has a different chapter order. How much longer are we talking? Well, the Hebrew version contains roughly 2,700 words that are completely missing from the Greek version. I mean, that is a significant difference. That's not just a few typos. Now, for a long time, people wondered, maybe this is just a weird translation issue.
But then came the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. This was a game changer because they proved that different Hebrew versions of Jeremiah were circulating at the exact same time. So this wasn't a translator's choice. They were genuinely two different Hebrew editions of the book from the very beginning.
Which, of course, leads to the big, obvious question. So, which one is the right one? I mean, if two ancient versions exist, what does that mean for how we read and understand this book?
The answer, it turns out, lies in that final stage of the book's construction. And here's the key. Having two versions isn't a problem we need to solve. It's actually the final clue that reveals the book's ultimate purpose.
Today, the scholarly consensus is that these aren't competing versions, but different editions for different communities. The shorter Greek version, it likely reflects an earlier stage of the book's development, maybe an edition for the community that ended up in Egypt. But the longer Hebrew version, that's the final expanded edition, and it seems it was specifically compiled for the exiles living in Babylon.
And the final editors intentionally added all that extra material, those 2,700 words, for a very specific reason: to strengthen and clarify the message of hope and restoration for the people who needed to hear it most. That was the community in exile, whose entire future was hanging in the balance.
This quote from Andrew Sheed just captures it perfectly. He says that Jeremiah saw the community in Babylon as the one group of people with a future. The final form of the book was tailored for them because, as Sheed puts it so beautifully, the seeds of the church were planted in Babylonian soil. All the hope for the future rested with them.
So, in the end, solving the Jeremiah puzzle isn't just a fun literary exercise. It shows us that this is a living document, a book that was shaped and molded over 50 years to deliver a message not just of judgment, but of profound, enduring hope. And that leaves us with one final thought to wrestle with. How does knowing how a story is written change what that story means for us today?